bitches, hoes, men, women, children, whoever you are, everyone's welcome to your boy Peter here, aka Peter Freakout 10, baby, bringing you guys an episode of the Movie Review Show, where the good movies are always reviewed. Alright, back again doing our movie review. Now, on today's episode, we're taking a look at a film that may not be Christmas themed, but I figured why not give it a review, because this is a movie that deserves a review before the year ends, along with the next film that I'll talk about, which the next one may be set in the theme of Christmas and New Year's, but we'll talk about that for another time. And it's a film that I thought was the perfect choice for this particular director to take on, as the story this is based on has all the hallmarks of his directing talents. Especially when you consider his talents, I feel, really give this story a touch beyond any other version that this story has seen before, whether it's the cartoon or the movie. And what film is that, you may be asking? That film is none other than Sleepy Hollow. But how does it all come together? Well, grab your headless horseman suits, grab a good horse, ride that bitch through the night as we talk about Sleepy Hollow. Now, Sleepy Hollow, this is a film made in the year 1999, and it's directed by Tim Burton. Now, Tim Burton needs no introduction, as he directed both of the Batman movies. He also did Edward Scissorhands, Ed Wood, even Mars Attacks. He also had a hand in The Nightmare Before Christmas. He wasn't the director, that was Henry Selick. I want to make that perfectly clear, because a lot of people seem to think he directed that film. No, he just came up with the idea. Now, this is based on the Washington Irving story, The Legend of the Sleepy Hollow, which was published in 1820, which had its own adaptations, like the 1922 silent film called The Headless Horseman with Will Rogers as Ichabod Crane, an animated short film in 1934, and most famously, the Disney version, The Adventures of Ichabod and Mr. Toad from 1949. Now, the idea and the seed that was planted to get this film off the ground came from special effects artist and the man responsible for bringing Chucky to life, Kevin Yeager, as he became interested in doing a version of the story. He had come across Andrew Kevin Walker, writer of 7 and 8mm, who also became interested in the idea of bringing the story to life, being that Kevin had just had success with 7, and he was looking to work with him, and the two decided to get a movie going. They pitched the idea to several studios before landing in the office of Paramount Pictures, where Scott Rudin agreed to greenlight the film. Before they continued the movie, Kevin was commissioned by Miramax to direct the next Hellraiser movie at the time, Bloodline. An experience that was wrought with disagreements and interference, leading him to leave the production, and Joe Chappelle of Halloween 6 fame, or Pain, depending on who you talk to, had to come in and finish the movie. Which, judging by what became of Hellraiser after, I say he made the right decision. The two met back up and decided to continue writing the story with the original intent of making it a smaller scale movie, with the focus on making it a slasher with Andrew Kevin Walker eyed to direct. At first, Paramount, though, was hesitant about making the film, as they looked at the film as just another period piece, but Paramount CEO Sherry Lansing, who helped get Edward Scissorhands off the ground, let Tim Burton in on the idea and that it was in development, with another figure getting involved to have producing duty. This being the legend in the filmmaking world, Francis Ford Coppola. Yes, the Godfather, Francis Ford Coppola, who agreed to let his production company, American Zoetrope, produce the film. Tim himself was dealing with the failed attempt to get his Superman Lives film off the ground, and the idea of a Sleepy Hollow film piqued his interest. He didn't know till editing, though, that Francis Ford Coppola was involved. Despite this, he only knew of Sleepy Hollow through the Disney version, but he was also excited to direct, being that one of his teachers and mentors basically also worked on the Disney version, and he also wanted to take on a straight-faced horror movie. With Tim Burton now involved and excited that Tim Burton was going to take on the directing chairs, Andrew Kevin Walker handed the reins over to him with no trouble. With all these people involved, Paramount grew a little more confident in the film and gave the film a budget of $70 to $100 million. And Tim got the cast and crew together, some of them being regulars of his movies. The original plan was to shoot the film on location as they scouted locations in upstate New York. Sadly, none of them met the qualifications that they felt would bring the film to life. After realizing the States weren't going to cut it, they moved production to the United Kingdom, with the main town being a set that they built in front of a duck pond. Despite this, the States did have some small scenes that had to be shot on a soundstage in New York, particularly the windmill at the end, which was actually set on fire, and they had to build a safe area for the cameraman to get a good shot. The original intention was to shoot the film in black and white, similar to what he did with Ed Wood. But when that didn't prove feasible, his cinematographer, Emmanuel Lubieski, suggested going for more of a saturated look, which Tim Burton agreed to. For the makeup effects, Kevin Yeager stayed on to handle the deaths and decapitations, which were achieved with silicone heads. For the moments involving the headless horsemen coming in and killing people, this was achieved with a mix of practical effects as well as CGI. For the practical effects, they built a mechanical horse for the stuntman and/or actor to ride on, and they put a mask on him that covered his face. This would help in the editing later to get CGI to take off his head. For the moments that he was riding the horse, though, they had it on set, but they also put it in front of a green screen. So they went through a lot to get that horseman to really come to life. Shooting lasted till May of that year, and the marketing machine really got into high gear. The trailer was revealed at Comic-Con of 1999, which drew a round of applause from people, I guess because they were excited to see Tim Burton take on a horror movie. But they also got a website going, which Variety described as the most ambitious online launch of a motion picture, where cast and crew did a Q&A, Fangoria gave it a feature cover story for their November issue. Toys were also made. McFarlane Toys got involved, which I didn't know till this video. Now I want to get some. Tim Burton did some special on TV where they were marathoning his movies in prep for this one. And the movie was released on November 19, 1999. Despite opening to number 2 behind The World Is Not Enough, it still made over $30 million in its opening weekend. And by the time December rolled around, it made over $70 million. So it made a good chunk of its budget back. We'll get more on the final result depending on when this is posted. But I think the fact that Tim Burton was taking on an R-rated movie really made audience interested. The movie also received positive reviews from critics. On Rotten Tomatoes, it carries a 70%. Critics praised the movie for the cast, in particular Johnny Depp, the look of the film. Roger Ebert praised that element, awarding the film 3.5 out of 4 stars, calling it the best-looking horror film since Bram Stoker's Dracula, with some criticizing the film because of the changes to the story, and some felt aspects were a missed opportunity. Audiences, though, loved the film, probably more than critics, as on that side, the audience has an 80%, so much higher than the critics. On IMDb, it has a 7.3 out of 10. So a lot of the love for the film came more from the audience, even though the critics seemed to enjoy it. Now, I can tell you, going into this film, I was very excited to check it out. I have known of the story of Sleepy Hollow because I remember in English, in my second year of high school, we had a Halloween course where we talked about the story of it, and we watched the Disney version to kind of compare and contrast the two. And I liked it for what it was. I don't remember the story, so I do remember some aspects of the Disney version. I don't know if there were any big changes in that version from the main story. So when you guys are watching this, I'm not going to try and compare and contrast the two. But I thought it was an interesting story all around. And there was an interesting way that a movie could be seen from this story. At the time, I didn't think it was going to happen because you would need someone who pulled it off right. But when I heard this was in production, hearing Tim Burton was involved and all the stuff leading up to its release, I got really excited. I love the way they did the trailer, and seeing Francis Ford Coppola was involved. I was there. So I took a night out to see it, and I saw it with my next film I plan to review, End of Days, and it surpassed my expectations. I can totally see what Roger Ebert meant in this review. And I'll go a step further and I'll say this is probably Tim Burton's best movie since both of the Batman films. Yes, you heard me say it, and it really shows that he can handle R-rated material like this, as well as horror, all of which he has shown to take on before, but never to the extent of this. And I think he did a fantastic job, and it's very clear that it's not just him, but also Andrew Kevin Walker it's clearly written by people and done by people who wanted to honor the story. And both of their love for horror is on full display here more than, I think, Tim's other movies. And I think it was a great way for Andrew Kevin Walker to step out of his comfort zone. Here was a guy writing crime thrillers, so it was interesting for him to take on this sort of film. But I'll explain why later. I love this movie. But with the cast in this film, you got Johnny Depp from TV's 21 Jump Street, Edward Scissorhands, Ed Wood. He was also in The Ninth Gate. You have Christina Ricci from both of the Addams Family movies and Casper. Miranda Richardson from The Crying Game and The Empire Son. Michael Gambon from Toys. He was also in Mobsters and Clean Slate. You also have small roles from people like Casper Van Dien from Starship Troopers. Jeffrey Jones, a Tim Burton regular, and he was also in Beetlejuice and Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Christopher Lee from Gremlins 2, The New Batch, and he's going to be in The Lord of the Rings. And playing the Headless Horseman is none other than Christopher fucking Walken. Yes, Christopher Walken from Batman Returns, Wayne's World 2, Mousetrap, and of course Ants. But getting into the film, basically the plot of the film is we meet this man named Ichabod Crane, played by Johnny Depp, who is a constable in upstate New York dealing with the trauma of seeing his mother die. While living in New York, he basically tries pushing for the cops to investigate a series of murders going on. Annoyed by his constant push for that, they basically decide to get rid of him by sending him up to a Dutch village known as Sleepy Hollow, where the locals live in fear of a bunch of slayings going on, which they believe to be at the hands of a ghoulish boogeyman known as the Headless Horseman, played by Christopher Walken, a once rootless soldier during the Revolutionary War that was so rootless, in fact, that his own group went against him and chopped off his head. At first, Ichabod doesn't believe any of this, making mental note of the fact that all the murders appear without a head, but he does not want to think supernatural is involved. But the more he starts to look into it with the help of this boy named Mazbeth, played by Mark Pickering, who lost his father to the Headless Horseman, he begins to look into a way of figuring out a way of trying to stop this. All the while drawing conclusions that a new lady friend named Katrina, played by Christina Ricci, and her family could be tied into what is going on. Will Ichabod be able to save her and her family who find themselves at the mercy of the Headless Horseman? Or will the Headless Horseman have each of their heads in a glass case? Now, the one thing I feel this film really succeeds in is its script. Andrew Kevin Walker delivers on a script that, as I said, steps away from his usual crime thriller work that he brought in 7 and 8mm. And with ease really brings his touch in a way that I think fits the world of Sleepy Hollow here, but also expands on the story a bit, especially in the character development and changes to the story. I know some people in their reviews, particularly the critics, don't like how Ichabod is portrayed here. I like the idea of him being a detective while also finding himself fighting the fact that the supernatural are at work here. I like this replacement instead of the bumbling buffoon that he was in the Disney version, who ends up dying because of his own stupidity and being drunk. But not only is he given a facelift, but I also like how the story expands on other elements in the film, like Katrina and her relationship with Ichabod, as opposed to being a woman who just strolls into town as all eye candy for the guys, as opposed to here where it feels like there is more to her here. And I like how the story ties into her family and their ties to the Headless Horseman's backstory. So the story feels like there is more at stake here rather than just one guy who ends up being the target of the Headless Horseman. And the movie itself still holds on to the poetic excuse sort of vibe to their relationship that was in the story, but Kevin is able to wove it into the story where it doesn't feel out of place. And it still feels like there's a modern lens done that respects how it was done in the story, but also feels like it has a way of making it feel modern. And I really like that with this film. And because of that, the tone itself feels like there's a sense of balancing the elements that would make the film feel slow with the horror elements. And the last element of the film that I thought was executed brilliantly is the Headless Horseman. This, I think, is the best interpretation of the Headless Horseman. I thought he was executed brilliantly. I like that this version has a backstory that portrays him as a wronged, sympathetic figure, kind of creating this Frankenstein monster side to him, which also ties into the fact that you do feel sorry for him and you can kind of understand what he's going through, but you also kind of see that he was wrong just for doing his job, but you also kind of know that he didn't know his limits, and that's sort of why they went against him, which kind of ties into Tim Burton's autism, as well as autism in general, where you don't realize your limits. And the story still goes out of its way to really push forward how much of a threat the horseman is, with him burning down villages, killing people in the town. Kids even get killed, so that's something to take note of. So the threat level is still extremely high with him in this movie. And I think when he's on screen, the film really shines. With that said, the only aspect of the film that I feel could have been done without is the dream sequences, with Ichabod flashing to the last moment he saw his mother before he died. I get what they're trying to do with that whole area, was kind of show that he still has those visions and he's still kind of holding on to that PTSD. But there's some points when they feel like they repeat it over and over again, and it really doesn't amount to anything. And there's not even a story beat with those elements. Like, you would think with how it's done in the film, it would have pushed to something, but it never does. So it's a waste of time, especially with Christopher Lee's role in the film and in those sequences that you think would be something, but they're really not. So it just comes across as a waste of time. I don't know if stuff was deleted in that area, but those elements feel really underdeveloped. But besides that, I think it does a great job modernizing the legend of the Headless Horseman and still holding on to what made the story work in the first place. Now, on a technical side, I agree with Roger Ebert. This is one of the most beautiful looking horror films I've seen in a long time. I think, along with House on Haunted Hill, I think they're both a couple of the best looking horror films of 1999. This is a beautifully shot film with some amazing looking sets. Whether it's the village that all the carnage is taking place, or the huge tree where you see the horseman is taking all the heads and you see like blood coming out of the tree bark, and when they start chopping into it, there's like this fucking storage place where all the heads are in. These sets not only put you in the atmosphere, but also create a sense of coldness in the environment with how the fog machine was used and the cloudy weather. You want to look away because you can feel how cold it is, but you can't because the sets are so eye-catching. I even like the cloudy filter effect they added. It didn't feel out of place. I thought it contributed to the cloudy, late fall, winter vibe that it was going for, and it was barely noticeable. You compare this to, say, the small scene in The Bone Collector, which I like, with that really bad filter that they tried to make it look day for night, or, say, Payback with that awful looking, like, weird look that they had. This is much better. On top of that, Tim's use of the camera is splendid, especially when he recreates shots of the cartoon, like the bridge shot, but he also gives them their own touch to those shots. The way he shoots the Headless Horseman riding through the night, and just how he's able to show how fast he moves, and the brutality of him as a monster, and just how much of a force he is not to be reckoned with. And in those moments, he really knows how to work with effects, heavy scenes, and there's some of the shots in that film that I feel, in a way, make the violence, in a way, seem beautiful. The same way Francis did it with Dracula. It's got the elements of the blood in a way where it's shot to make it seem beautiful and very poetic, in the same way that Francis did it with Dracula. And it's got that elegance to some of the shots that elevate them beyond being carnage for the sake of carnage. Those moments are also accompanied by great score by Tim Burton regular Danny Elfman, whose score really ties into the tone of this film and really elevates the Gothic tone, much in the same way I think Mojiak Kailar, I believe I'm saying his name right, did with Dracula. So yeah, this is a wonderfully made film. Along with that, I also think he gets a lot out of the acting and the actors themselves, which I think is also great. Johnny Depp, who reunites with Tim Burton after both Edward Scissorhands and Ed Wood, gives probably his best performance working with him. As I feel after Edward Scissorhands, he really started to embrace the weird side that he was given with that film. Ed Wood especially, and I get that's how Ed Wood was in real life, but I still found it Johnny Depp carrying on the weird side he got with Edward, which there worked because there was a sense of innocence to him, and he did feel like a character with an arc trying to understand the world. Here, though, I like that he kind of reined himself in a bit, back to playing a character more straight-faced, and I like that. I thought he worked well with the poetic nature of his character that was in the story, while also giving it his own touch. Like, when you look at the character, this is how I really expected Ichabod to look, and I thought it allowed him to emote with the situation and work off the beats in the story in a way that was natural.
But why am I the only one who sees that to solve crimes, to detect the guilty, we must use our brains to recognize vital clues, using up-to-date scientific techniques.
And even down to him doing a few stunts for this film, I gotta commend Johnny for that. Christina Ricci, who I like a lot as an actress, I thought she did well as Katrina. I thought her and Johnny shared some great chemistry with each other, but you grew sympathy for her, especially when you see the twist with her mother, and there's a sense of innocence to how she plays the character and the voice itself that she gave her. I'm glad she didn't do the whole Wednesday persona again, or the Casper character. She wasn't smart or abrasive, but...
Tell me what you dreamt. I have shed my tears for Brom, and yet my heart is not broken. Do you think me wicked?
So Christina Ricci, gotta give her a lot of credit. Michael Gambon, always nice to see him in a film. He plays Katrina's father, who means well, but is stuck up. He does well in those parts.
During this dark time that I and my dear wife are giving this little party. Young sir, you are most welcome, even if you are selling something.
Miranda Richardson, who, spoiler, gonna put that right there. Once this is gone, turn up your volume. Who is actually the one controlling the headless horseman and drawing him out to attack. I thought when she's revealed to be what she is, she had a good sinister and slimy presence that really made you hate her. She delivered well in that area. Jeffrey Jones, he does fine. He's just a priest with a corrupt past, and there he's all right, I guess. Not much of a character. Playing the Headless Horseman, though, Christopher Walken, I thought was perfect here. I really thought it worked, because while it's Christopher Walken, he isn't talking. He's more so communicating through body language and facial expressions, much in the same way Johnny did with Edward. But I thought he embodied that perfectly. He comes across to me like a puppy dog who has teeth, but also has one leg. Especially in the situation you see him in and how he's being chased. And just the scene with him and the little girl that kind of feels like something out of Frankenstein. You really feel for him, and at some points can understand why he's doing it. Especially when you see what the town did to him. And I thought Christopher brought that there perfectly. Other actors, you got Mark Pickering as this kid named Mazbath, who joins Ichabod in helping him take down the Headless Horseman. I liked him for the fact he was a kid looking to avenge his father who had died at the hands of the Headless Horseman. I like the fact that he wasn't annoying or wimpy, but actually acted like an adult. Casper Van Dien, a guy fighting to be the suitor of Katrina. Lisa Marie as Ichabod's mother. Same thing with Casper Van Dien, not much to him. For what little time they have, they're alright, but not much to leave an impression. You have small roles from people in the town like Richard Griffith as the town magistrate, or Christopher Lee, who sends him to Sleepy Hollow, which when Christopher Lee's on screen, he's great. And even Michael Goth, Alfred himself as the town mortuary. Again, the acting, I still think, is great. Despite some of the characters not having much, it's not the actors' fault because they do what they can with the material given. And when it comes to the main actors, I think it's some of the best acting I've seen for a horror film. But of course, with this being the Headless Horseman, there of course come the effects. And boy, did Tim Burton go for it. The effects in this film are fantastic. This is a bloody-ass movie. they go for it with the violence. There's decapitations in this film, and they're done with some great practical effects. Some of them do have some blood splatter that look like CGI, but how it's mixed by the great practical effects by Kevin Yeager are done tremendously. One of my favorite heavy effects-driven scenes is the church scene, where the Headless Horseman can't enter the church, so pretty much one of the people he kills, he grabs the sharp end of a fence, throws it through this guy, and pulls him out and chops off his head. That was awesome. Like I said, there are some usage of green screen and CGI in moments, but there's a lot of practicality, especially with the horse. Like I said, they built a mechanical horse, which I thought looked great. And just how that was shot, how they were able to hide the CGI, especially when it came to the moments with the Headless Horseman getting the head off him, I thought it was used effectively and not overly reliant on it. So yeah, the effects in this film are great. But yeah, I really didn't expect myself to love this film as much as I did. And I totally feel the film deserves the love that it gets. I already touched upon one of the cons, that being that there's some story beats that I do feel like go nowhere in this movie. In particular, the element of Johnny Depp's mother, or even Casper Van Dien, I'll say, who you think's going to be some sort of love triangle between Katrina, him, and Ichabod, but it goes nowhere because he's killed off. That character really could have amounted to something, but there's none of that there. But also the final feels a bit lacking because it's not like there is some fight between Ichabod and the Headless Horseman, and while that's there, I will admit, I like a lot leading up to the final, the beginning and the middle, up until the ending. And it builds itself up like it's leading to something, but it really doesn't. I won't spoil, but it's a very unfulfilling final, which surprised me, especially with what led up to it. You had a very cool final, beginning and middle, but it really doesn't feel like there's any sort of a fight. There doesn't feel like there's a moment that feels like those flashbacks from earlier are there, because it's just a final that amounts to nothing. I really feel like there could have been more of a fight between Ichabod and the Headless Horseman, or maybe work those flashbacks into the final. Have the Horseman play mind games with him. Having the mother aspect, like, don't kill me. Like, you could have had that there, making it hard to fight him, but they don't do that. So I really wish there was more to the final. I don't know if they ran out of money or this was their intended final, but it is what it is. Besides those problems, though, Sleepy Hollow is a walk in the park of dread that is delivered fantastically by Tim Burton. And it shows that he really should take on more horror films because he really feels at home in this genre, because he delivers with this film. So if you like the Headless Horseman story and you like Tim Burton, I highly recommend you see Sleepy Hollow. There is something delivered here that I really feel makes it stand with something as great as Bram Stoker's Dracula. So when it comes down to it, the final rating for Sleepy Hollow is a 9.8 out of 10, and it deserves it. Therefore, gets the Alexandra seal of approval. Definitely one to check out. So, yeah, that's my review for Sleepy Hollow, and next time I am going to do a review on End of Days, and I have a review planned of, let me get it, and of Clerks. This will be watching in a bit, but I also have a review of Mallrats and Chasing Amy, because I'm getting prepared for Dogma, which I will be watching next Friday. So those will be the coming reviews. Today, though, I will be checking out Fight Club, so be on the lookout for that review. But next time, I will do End of Days. That's the next one I plan to review, like I said. And then I review Fight Club, and then Clerks and these films, because I want to get ready for Dogma, as well as Deuce Bigelow, Male Gigolo. So be on the lookout for those. I'll see you guys later. Let me know in the comments below what you guys think of Sleepy Hollow. Did you guys enjoy this film? Did you guys feel it worked? Do you guys feel it represents the story well? Or do you feel, or do you agree with some of the critics who feel that it disrespected the story despite looking good? But let me know in the comments down below. Be sure to rate, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.